So, we talked a few moments ago about the ego complex. Now, 500 years ago, there was no ego complex. There was really no ego. There was no psychological understanding of self that would include any notion of ego. The self was something very simple, and there was a light side and a dark side to our sense of self. The light side, like the Chinese Tao, the Tao, the philosophy of the Tao, the understanding of Taoism, really evolved from thousands of years of wise old sages watching streams and rivers and noticing that there was a light side to the river where the sun could shine and you could see what's on the bottom of the river. And there was a dark side where it was much deeper and you couldn't see what was in there. So the sense of self for thousands of years was very similar to this. It wasn't that complicated. You know, we had this five senses, and we had our ability to talk and communicate, and there was a supernatural world. All the things that we could see and touch had a spirit. And the world that we live in was composed of things and their associated spirits. And the world was alive and very enchanted. So along comes the age of enlightenment, the Renaissance, the age of enlightenment, the industrial age, the age of science. And our knowledge exploded. And all of a sudden, we stared into the heavens with our telescopes, and we learned there were no gods or goddesses in the heavens. That was simply a projection of something that was developing inside us that we saw outside of us. But science negated that. It really, as Nietzsche said, God died along with all the gods and goddesses. They didn't die. They went inside. They went inside where they're still alive and thriving. All the deities of the Middle Ages are inside us and perhaps outside of us. There's no simple location to these energies. So what lies beyond the ego complex? When the ego got so complicated, instead of a simple stream with black and white, it became a multifaceted jewel with many different facets, many different aspects, all these primary selves and these disowned selves. And it took such energy to keep this story going. So this is the ego complex that we're now talking about. And all of the other complications that we used to project into the heavens and out onto Mount Olympus, these psychological structures are within us. And this is what the psychology of Carl Jung was really attempting to understand. He considered himself to be an empiricist. And instead of biology or botany, classifying all the different kinds of butterflies, what he was classifying was all these different archetypal images, these religious motifs, these mythological motifs that show up in world mythologies and religions and individual dreams. He was trying, like an empiricist, to scientifically examine and categorize the unconscious that lies beyond the reach of the ego complex, including the shadows. So we must begin to at least conceptually define this territory to really have an understanding of the depths and the power of shadow work. This is one of the things that Jordan Peterson is doing. He's talking a lot about shadow work. He's talking a lot about the archetypal structures that underlie the shadow work, so that when we experience a victim, it resonates with this archetype of victim that is very deep within all of us. This is so important in today's age. So shadow work not only deals with the parts of the ego that have been suppressed, but it deals with the underlying archetypal images that are part of the dynamic interaction and projection of our shadows. This is where shadow work gets really deep. And this is where the postmodern, the modern rejection of all deities and deity realms, and the postmodern only talking and reintroducing the deity realm, but only the positive deities. What has gone into shadow in this postmodern, post-Christian culture is the problem of evil. And this lies at the core of real, impactful shadow work. What have we done with the problem of evil? Well, we've swept it under the rug and pretend that it doesn't exist. And then it shows up in figures like Hitler and Stalin and ISIS. The problem of evil has not gone away. It's just gone underground. And we need to bring it back into consciousness in a way that our modern and postmodern minds can find new creative ways to integrate it, because we need that evil to be whole.